We're looking at the offseason moves that haven't been made yet, tanking for Cooper Flagg after his performance against Team USA, and who on Team USA should start in the Olympics, all right now on the Locked On NBA podcast.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, welcome back to the Locked On NBA podcast. So happy to have you here with us on this Wednesday show. We're your regular Wednesday crew. I'm John Karalis, host of the Locked On Celtics podcast. Find me on Twitter at John_Karalis.
And I'm Jake Madison, host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast on Twitter at NolaJake.
Very happy to have you here. If you're a subscriber, if you're not a subscriber, make sure you're on subscribing to get this show wherever you get your podcast. Get into that YouTube page. Click the hit the bell so you know when we drop a new video, and get into the comment section. Let us know what you're thinking about all of this stuff when we talk about who should be starting for Team USA.
Yeah, we need help with that, man. That's not easy. We need to crowdsource that.
We really that I don't know if there are any right answers from there, but we're gonna do like a who should and who will. That's gonna be fun later. We'll talk about Cooper Flagg because everybody's talking about Cooper Flagg out of the game between the USA and the select team. But first, we're going to start with the moves that haven't been made in today's show, brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase of last-minute tickets. Jake, there are moves that haven't been made. One of them involves your New Orleans Pelicans, Brandon Ingram, arguably the biggest name left out there. Zach LaVine, that trade, the guys talked about that on yesterday's show. Lauri Markkanen, who I don't know if he's being shopped necessarily, but Danny Ainge doing the Danny Ainge thing of, hey, if you guys want to blow me away and give me 1 million picks so people can be like, why do people trade with Danny Ainge? Then, yeah, I'll listen to you guys. But I think Ingram, along with LaVine, are the two biggest names, and Ingram wants a $200 million extension.
208.
208.
208 to be
Got to make sure you get that 208 in there.
There's a difference between $50 and $52 million a year.
That's true. That does actually have, especially when you're paying a tax and you're over the second apron. And so this, I don't know what to make of this offseason. We talked about it last week. This second apron is messing with people. There are teams that might be in the mix for a guy like Ingram that, under other circumstances, they'd be like, yeah, let's take it on. We'll just be an expensive team, but we think he can fit with us. But now trading for him and giving him the extension, because there's like a two-part thing to this. Not only are you trading for Ingram, you are now making the decision to basically give him the extension. You're not trading for him to not give him the extension. There's a potential for some of these teams to be pushed into that second apron, and they don't want to do that now. So it's complicating things, and it just makes the rest of this offseason, this summer, where it's normally much more active. It's only July. We're recording this on July 9th. We're definitely more active normally around here. It's just it's quieted down, I think, because of that.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing teams be scared off by the second apron. And I think, when you look at Brandon Ingram, and I think he's the easiest to kind of talk about this, right? Good player, guy who could give you 25, 5, and 5 on any given night, right? Could average that pretty easily for a season. That's a really useful player, but there's some big flaws to his game. He's a mid-range artist, doesn't really take three-pointers like you want, really struggled in the postseason without Zion next to him. So admittedly, it's a kind of different defense he was facing in OKC, who's good on that. I think what this kind of shows is there's like a squeezing of like the upper middle class in the NBA right now. Max guys like Paul George are still going to get paid. Like that top end player is going to get paid a max deal. But if you're not one of those guys, like the days of like throwing you a 30% max is over. And because there's only so much money out there and teams are scared of the second apron, and I want to circle back to that point in a second here, like you get squeezed, right? You see this. Think about Brandon Ingram right now, that if he refuses to kind of concede a more team-friendly deal to New Orleans, goes into next summer as an unrestricted free agent, like he's not going to get a 30% max deal then. And when those guys get snapped up and teams don't spend money in free agency is not like all these teams have $60 million. So every player is changing teams through that, right? It's done through sign and trades, or they just get extended and then traded before they would ever become a free agent. You're going to see some of those players who are really good probably have to take the non-taxpayer mid-level exception at $12 million. And we've seen this before where a guy like who should get paid has to take like a $12 million 1-year deal to prove it to that current team and hopefully get paid in the future. I don't know how it'll play out exactly with Brandon Ingram. The interesting thing I find is it's not going into the second apron this year. Like so many teams, including the Pelicans, are hard capped at the first apron. You're not even allowed to get to the second apron here. But it's trading for that guy, knowing in a year you've got to re-sign him, and in 2 years from now, you might be in the second apron, right? It's the fear of going to the second apron in the future, not going into it this season, because literally something like 20 teams are hard capped at the first apron. So even if you traded for him, you couldn't get there, but it might limit you in the future. And that's what you saw with the Los Angeles Clippers, as we talked about last week with Paul George. They're so scared of going into the second apron in the future and what it would do to them that they were willing to get worse right now so that maybe they could improve in the future. And it's just like a wild kind of new way to try and build a team, I think. And guys like Ingram get squeezed out a little bit.
Yeah, so you look at the teams that have gone into the second apron. Boston, obviously, they won a championship, so they're running it back.
And they can re-sign their own guys, so it makes perfect sense because they don't need to add to that team. If you needed to add to that team, it's an entirely different thing.
Right, but that's my point. The teams that are going into the second apron, that are willing to get into that second apron, are teams that feel comfortable that the guys that they have are going to be good enough, I think, to win it. Now, maybe some teams are over and they maybe they miscalculated. The Phoenix Suns are well into the second apron. They thought the guys that they had were going to be good enough, and that's a different story. But you don't go into the second apron without thinking the team that we have here is going to be good enough where we don't have to make those moves around the deadline. And why the Clippers are afraid of the second apron, and why someone trading for Brandon Ingram or Lauri Markkanen or Zach LaVine, even though I'd say Markkanen is probably the least of a risk of these guys. But
I agree with that. Like of those three, he fits on every team, and the other two don't.
Yes, but there's still a question of if we do go into the second apron with Markkanen or LaVine or Ingram, is that enough? Or with the Clippers, why did the Clippers approach, if Paul George is telling the 100% honest truth, which is still up for some debate, but if that's how the negotiations went, why did the Clippers approach negotiations that way? Because they wanted their out. They wanted to be like, okay, if this doesn't work, if we can't figure out a championship team out of this, well, in a couple of years, we're going to have to break this up. So we can't go 4 years for you, not just because of second apron, but we don't want to handcuff ourselves as a way to get out of it. This I think is the biggest thing. And you hear Brian Windhorst talking to people in Cleveland. It's not necessarily that you can't trade for Brandon Ingram. It's that when you give him the extension and you do go into the second apron, now it's like, well, Ingram and Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley is a nice team. Is it a championship team? That has a lot of questions.
You've got to be certain, right? Like you've got to be certain if you're going to do this sort of thing, or you're just straight up like going all in, not with like pocket aces or something like that, kind of the Phoenix Suns are right now. They're taking a big risk, a big gamble, and if it doesn't work out, you don't win a title, and you have to dismantle that team just to rebuild. Like that's a pretty barren chest and longer rebuild than you're going to have. Whereas Boston, it's like, yeah, we proved it. We should absolutely run it back and go into the second apron because there aren't questions there. Those questions have been answered. And so if there are questions about your core, like you're right, you can't go into the second apron because there's nothing you can do at that point other than fire your coach, right? That's the other move you could probably make that you'll see teams do. But then at that point, you're out of options and you may as well blow it up. But then you probably don't have picks because you traded those picks for those guys. And that's where this becomes, like so dangerous on this sort of thing. And that's why you're seeing, Ingram, who should have a market, like not really have one.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm both surprised and not surprised because you hit it in the beginning, right? You're not just trading for Brandon Ingram. You're trading for a lack of flexibility and a $208 million contract because that is the only way to be certain that he won't walk in free agency after a year.
And I think, go ahead.
As a side note, one of the most people were asking me, like, did they miss the boat on trading Ingram? And it's like, look, the best time to ever trade a player is like the first year of their extension, right? Like that's when they have the most value around the league, when they have the most years left on it, right? Yeah. And if you're just signing a dude to an extension just to trade him, like I get it, but you get the like inherent weirdness of that, right? And like saying that out loud of like, the most value they're going to have is like, it's like before you drive the car off of the lot. And it's like, is that like a way to live and think? I don't know. That's like a philosophical thing I was thinking about with it.
So I think my final thought here is that Ingram and Levine are, I think, indicative of the impact of the CBA in that teams they're not willing to take the chances anymore. Those, you know what, we'll figure it out. You can always trade him later. That is not possible anymore because of all of these hard caps, these scenarios, first apron, second apron, blah, blah, blah. You can't just say, we'll roll the dice with Ingram. Let's see if he fits with Mitchell. Let's see if he fits with Evan Mobley. And maybe we can strike some sort of like harmony and we'll be really good. And if we don't, we'll just move him a couple years into this and it'll be fine. But you can't just move him because now you're handcuffed with, you can't take in more salary than you trade out. And it's not just you, it's the other teams that you're trading him to. If you can't aggregate certain ways, and if you do, there's hard caps all over the place. This is the stuff that's scaring people. So what we're going to start seeing is, I think, just like, Klay Thompson, just like Paul George, they're going to leave for nothing, or their teams are going to take back nothing. And we're going to have like a few years of these bigger names, these bigger salaries walking. There's going to be a lot of walking in free agency, and they're going to start going to teams with the cap space. Like they're going to start signing with Charlotte and Orlando and, the Wizards. They're going to start going to the places with the money. This is the impact of the CBA. The teams that have the money, if you're Brandon Ingram, you're going to be like, I want my $200 million. Well, who has the cap space? Welcome to Detroit, Brandon Ingram.
Yeah, no, it's
theoretically
that, right? Like Orlando or other places.
The talent's going to start spreading out all over the league, and it's all going to start balancing out, and everybody's within like 4 years, all of the cap sheets are going to start looking similar. And that's the goal of this CBA. This is what the CBA was designed to do, and Ingram, Levine, Markkanen to a degree. This is the impact. This is what the league wanted. So, all right. You know what the league's going to want next year? Cooper Flagg. Lots of teams going to be looking for Cooper Flagg. Why trade for Brandon Ingram now when you might have a chance at Cooper Flagg later, and that might be a whole lot better. We'll talk about that in a game of real or fake when we come back. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Now it's the summertime. Here in Boston, I'm going to take a little break from basketball. I'm going to fire up the Game Time app. I'm going to go see if I can pick up some tickets to some Red Sox games. It's going to be easy now because Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. So that makes getting tickets faster and easier. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go down to Lansdowne Street. I'm going to go to the Cask and Flag, and I'm going to have a couple of drinks. And right around first pitch, I'm going to check the Game Time app because the ticket prices go down the closer you get to first pitch. Now, you use the Game Time app because they have last-minute deals. So you can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets, not just for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, all of that. There are flash deals, exclusive in-app deals ahead of the game or the event, zone deals where you pick the section and they pick the seats. That helps you. So all you do is you do all that. You toggle the all-in pricing so you know the price you're going to pay when you check out. You get a panoramic view from your seat, and there's the lowest price guarantee. You get credited 110% of the difference if you find these same tickets somewhere else for less. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA. It's the name of this podcast for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON, LOCKED, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Thank you for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Make sure you're checking out the Locked On Sports Today podcast over there, or streaming channel all day, every day on YouTube or on the Amazon Fire TV channels app. Go check it out. It's on 24/7. All the real talk, all the real conversations, no fake arguments like you might see on major networks. Real sports, Jake.
That's what we do here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Every day. If your team might be looking to Cooper Flagg, and you might be getting really excited about Cooper Flagg, because
they should be. Every team should be.
We already knew. I mean, he's the consensus number one pick for next year's draft, and nothing has changed anybody's mind because he went there as part of the USA Select team, the youngest player there, 17 years old, and rolled through some of these established vets. Team USA. Okay. Did Team USA play their absolute hardest? Maybe not, but it doesn't matter, because when you're 17, you're out there dominating with no fear. That says something.
Look, the players spoke like glowingly about him, right? Like after the fact. And I think one of the things, you and I probably both know this, right? Like these dudes have huge egos. They don't like to be embarrassed, right? Remember who was it that dunked on LeBron when he was in like high school or college, and then they did like everything they could to not let that video get out of LeBron at like a summer camp or something, right? Like they don't want that. They don't want to get lit up by a 17-year-old. That's not what they're trying to do. And for him, so like in some sense, no, they're not going like 1,000%, but it's not like they're like mailing this in either, because they know how bad that would look. So this does say something, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, it says something. And now we wonder if it says more teams are going to tank. Let's play our favorite game here.
Is this real or fake? Just ask John and Jake.
Real or fake, Jake Madison? A lot more teams are going to get more into the Cooper Flagg business here by trying to tank rather than trying to get better for this upcoming season after this.
Yeah, I think this is very real. When you look at a dude who's 6'9", going to Duke, and everyone already basically has him as the number one overall pick, and then he does that well as a 17-year-old, and he's going to get a year of really good development. I look at the West in particular with this, right? Like there's a couple teams in the East that you're like, okay, they're going to be bad and they're tanking. Detroit's one of them. Right, Brooklyn's not going to be good. There's a couple other teams out there that's like, oh yeah, they're going to kind of be garbage. You know, the Wizards too. But in the West, it's what, Portland, and that's kind of it, is the only like real team that feels out of it. You have a team like Houston that's going to go for it. The Utah Jazz are kind of on the border of this. The West is going to be a bloodbath, and if you fall into a hole early, if you're Houston, if you're Utah, does that then maybe kind of spurn you to making a trade earlier in the season to just blow it up and realize like, yeah, we're not in the level of Minnesota or Denver or some of those other teams, so we need to retool here, and let's just start doing that now and get the jump on some of this, blow up our team, and then start tanking, you know, within a month of competitiveness, and then they give up?
Yeah, I think that might be where this answer is real, where a team that is, you look at a mix that they've given a shot to, and you say, okay, this isn't working. Now I say this about Atlanta, who got the number one overall pick without having to tank necessarily. So this does add an element into this kind of discussion. How much do you actually have to tank to get the number one pick?
Well, like look at a team like Detroit, right? Like they've had the worst record basically 2 years in a row and didn't end up with the number one overall pick.
Right. So a team like Charlotte that has a new coach, a new staff that they poached from the Boston Celtics, and some, you know, hopefully some promise on that side. Even if they win 10 more games, that's a 31 win team. that's still worse than the Atlanta Hawks were last year. You're still in the mix for a guy like Cooper Flagg. The Brooklyn Nets, it maybe isn't really a surprise that they traded Mikal Bridges when they did, because you're like, okay, we're not going to go that far he's a good player, but let's get a haul for him. Let's tank now. Let's get a shot at Cooper Flagg. If you get him, boom, you're back in the mix. And now you've got all of these picks to kind of support him as you go along. That's I think part of the equation, but like it's the middle of the season. Yeah. Like you said, maybe a mix that you didn't think you were hoping that would work doesn't. And you say, all right, we're going to move this guy. We are going to make the decision to tank rather than see this through, because the opportunity for a transformative player like Flagg is just too good. You cannot, you gotta enter that sweepstakes and hope for the best. And I'm not a draft expert. I don't know who else is in the draft, but I do know that people are saying it's a deeper draft than, what we've seen. So there could be other players in there. It's not just Cooper Flagg.
Right. Like you've seen this past, like, especially this past year where it was a weaker draft, right? No one like Victor Wembanyama, no one like Cooper Flagg in it, where it was teams last year were like, oh, let's go for it. Let's go get to the playoffs. Cause like, who cares about this pick nearly as much? I don't think you're going to see that in this draft. I think it might be like, even on training camp, right? You kind of get in there, you look at your group of guys and you're like, oh yeah, this ain't it. Like, this isn't going to do it. Let's cash in while value is higher. Right. And you don't really see a ton of trades until the trade deadline. You won't see stuff till December 15th, January 15th, right? When you can start, when guys become trade eligible. I wonder if you'll still see, if Lauri Markkanen's not moved, and then you get, on the eve of the season starting, does a team be like, hey, okay, we'll do this. Like, we actually think we're closer. The Jazz are going to look at their roster and be like, oh yeah, in this Western Conference, like, we don't stand a chance. This is when we need to retool it, right? Like, It's still a little early, I think, for teams to kind of evaluate where they're going to be. And once they start to do that, which comes around training camp, media day, preseason, I think that's when you'll see a team like I wouldn't be shocked if we have like a busier trade like November, December than we normally do, because teams are like, yeah, no, let's try and go get Cooper Flagg. I do think, that Team USA scrimmage where look, like scouts were going to be there. NBA personnel was going to be there. Everyone's basically already in Vegas for a lot of this stuff anyway, with Summer League around the corner. I do think that was something that was going to be very eye-opening for a lot of folks. So the real question, John, is going to be like, what's the tagline for tanking for Cooper Flagg?
I am going to go with the first name, and I'm going to go with like in the pooper for Cooper or something along those lines. I don't think there are any.
It's so good. It's so good.
I think in the pooper for Cooper is probably the best way to go.
There's that. There's raise the white flag, capture the flag. I think is also like a pretty good one. Lag for flag, sag for flag. Like all of those are options. In the pooper for Cooper is really good though.
I think it's better to go with the first name. Play like poop for Coop or something like that.
Yeah,
That's just more. You get, and plus you get to make poop jokes and like
everyone.
Listen. For all of the parents
we're
driving
mature
with
men
5-year-olds,
here, but
there are parents who are driving with 5-year-olds right now who just all of a sudden are just saying the word poop and laughing, and that's about the maturity level that we're at right now, because that's what we're doing.
Love it. That's how it look. Life should be fun. Make poop jokes.
Absolutely.
Look, something that we never thought was going to get said on Locked On NBA. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team.
That's why this is consistently a top 10 basketball podcast on Apple. This is because of this type of stuff. You can't lose with this. All right, let's play. ESPN asked the question on Tuesday. Who should start for Team USA? All right, we'll play that game, and we'll do that in just a second. The Team USA plays Canada on Wednesday night at 10:30. A friendly. I like calling exhibition games a friendly. That's just It's a
Getting
nice
into
way
that
to put
soccer
it.
mindset here.
It's like it's like some of the terminology. It's just a little friendly between USA and Canada. Canadian team is going to be really good. The USA team obviously is going to be the favorite. So, look, obviously stacked roster: Bam, Booker, Curry, Davis, Durant, Edwards, Embiid, Halliburton, Holiday, James, Kawhi, Tatum. That's a big time. That's a big time roster. Who should start?
Just straight. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. You're just being polite and go right into it.
We got to get into this.
Okay. So let's work backwards on you. So the question was who should, not who will, because there's a huge difference there.
There's two answers to all of this. Let's start with who should. Let's build our ideal, no ego. We're just going to build our ideal starting lineup.
Okay, so let's start in the backcourt, right? Like if I'm picking who should start, it's Steph Curry and Anthony Edwards is who I'm going to pick there. Curry's Curry, right? Like you have to start him in the 3-point shooting and everything that he brings. Like that's a no-brainer to me. Anthony Edwards should start too because this is basically the one holdover from Team USA last year. None of these other guys participated in FIBA and all of that. It was Anthony Edwards kind of holding it down and keeping the seats warm here. To me, that means he should kind of retain that starting spot, even if there's other players that maybe are more talented than him with that. But he also did really well for Team USA that year. It's like, don't lose your starting spot to injury or something like that, but not quite the exact same thing.
I'm going to say, as far as who should, Steph Curry. Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm going Drew Holiday next to him because I want a defensive-minded guy who can still hit the shots, right? You still need to space the floor. And I'm going to want a guy like Edwards to come off the bench and be maybe buoy that second unit. And I'm not taking what he said in the media all that seriously, but like also they have to adjust to me and my talent. Also, he is a guy that can carry a unit on his own. I kind of want to give him a second team to carry, so he's not like next to all of these other like Steph and he's taking away. I want him to be kind of the anchor of my second unit. So, my backcourt is Steph and Drew.
Okay, so let's do it this way. We both think Steph's gonna be starting.
Yes,
I'm assuming, right? Who do we think starts in the other backcourt spot?
I think it might actually be Holiday. I think they might actually go with the experience and the guy who just won a championship. And, I think Kerr might kind of skew with that because you need that defense. And like I said, I think you go to Anthony Edwards and be like, look, coming off the bench starting, we're giving you the primary scoring role off the bench. So when you come in, you do what you do. And so I think I think you just go with that. I think they actually do go with that lineup.
Do you think they basically run LeBron James kind of in the backcourt? Like I could see them not going with another guard there and going with like a wing heavy lineup. So maybe I structured this the wrong way in how we're talking about it now. Because it's like, if you think like LeBron, Durant are going to start, right, along with maybe Tatum or Kawhi, like you almost have to leave one of those guards out, and maybe it's going to be like LeBron James or Tatum kind of playing like the 2-guard spot.
Yeah, I did think about maybe putting Tatum as the 2 in a way, because I think Tatum could start. He's come off the bench for them in the past. I think Tatum could start. I think this version of Tatum has a case to start. And I think in the past when he came off the bench, it was right. But this version of Tatum, the way he played for the Celtics this year and in the playoffs, where he was very willing to give the ball up, move the ball like really well.
Willing to like defer and play to the strengths of the team,
that
right?
Facilitator,
like that kind of fits.
Yeah, I think that fits what the Team USA needs. They need to have a guy like Tatum who's big and he has to draw the attention, but a guy who's a willing passer like that he's become. I think you do need him. So you could go big and say Curry, Tatum.
That's what I think they're going to do. That's my guess, is that Tatum is kind of the 2 guard there. Like I think it should be Anthony Edwards based on like service and what he did last year, but I think he will be coming off the bench.
Yeah. And then you have what you think LeBron Durant.
You're starting LeBron, right? Like you're starting LeBron. I don't know if he should start. He's starting, right? Like that is that of all of them is etched in stone. Like we any chance of him not starting, we could just rule out right now, right? Like he's
fine.
starting.
That's fine. That's fine. I mean, I think if we're doing should,
I agree.
If we're doing should, then maybe you can go a different direction. But like honestly, like Kawhi Leonard should be on the bench. Like Kawhi Leonard should be limited and like very sparingly used. Like they should not overdo him at all. And I think everybody in the Clippers organization is like, please God, don't even play him at all. But if you're going Steph and Tatum at the guards, then if you do LeBron I guess LeBron would be your 4. And
probably. Then
so,
Durant is your 3.
I guess Durant would be your 3, and then what? Anthony Davis as your 5, or you start Joel Embiid.
I would start Anthony Davis and bring Embiid off the bench. AD is like a perfect like international FIBA center. And we saw him do it, right? Similar to Cooper Flagg. Like he was on the Olympic team in 2012, I think. Before he even played an NBA game, he had won a gold medal as like playing significant minutes for him. So I think he starts. You also have Embiid coming off the meniscus stuff. So like how fully ready is he is maybe a little bit of the question. And given that he's kind of the newcomer, Anthony Davis has been there before. So it's like I would stick with AD at the 5 and then go with a real different look with Embiid off the bench. And I have no idea which of those 2 will start.
This is crazy because you're sitting here.
It's so hard.
This is the most difficult thing because you're like, wait a minute, where does Devin Booker play? Like he's like really damn good. Like where does Bam Adebayo play? Do you play Bam next to Davis? Do you play Bam next to him? That's 2. I don't think that works. I don't know. But then again, against some of these teams with size and like the physicality, maybe you do need, some of those bigger guys out there to just kind of bang and rebound and defend like that. Maybe that does make sense.
So you need that type of guy, and that kept Tyson Chandler on that team maybe a little bit longer than he should have been in some of those years and was kind of pivotal for that. But I think you can bring that guy off the bench and go to them when you need to and use that as kind of like your adjustment guy than starting them. But I'm curious. This is why we said at the beginning of the show, we need some help here. Let us know in the comments down below what everyone's thinking the starting lineup should be.
I think you go Curry. If you go Curry, Tatum, Durant, LeBron, and Anthony Davis, I mean that's a good starting lineup. You can't miss. You can't miss with any of these starting
there's
lineups.
There's no right or wrong answer.
You can't miss
here
with any of these starting lineups. I like the idea of Anthony Davis, kind of anchoring the scoring off the bench. You can go with Booker. If you want to go smaller, you can bring Booker and Edwards in for LeBron and Tatum, and now you've got like a smaller kind of lineup where Durant's your 4 and whoever, maybe Davis or whoever's your 5. You have options. You can mix this up, and I think maybe this is actually like the genius of the assemblance of this team, where couple of scorers, couple of ball handlers, couple of tweener guys, couple of guys who are more assist heavy, couple of guys who are more, defense heavy. There's like different combinations that you can throw out there depending on who you're matching up with, because, you playing Spain versus Serbia, there's 2 different styles of play there. It's more up tempo who, maybe you want to go with a smaller lineup, and that's a game you don't play Embiid because there's injury limitations. So that, I don't know, starting. Yeah, sure. Let's go with that group.
There we go. We solved it. You're welcome, Steve Kerr.
Sure. Like, who starts? Who cares? Who cares who starts?
Don't matter. Everyone wins here.
Yeah. Okay. That'll be I could keep going with this stuff, but you just talk yourself into circles. I start sounding like Chidi Anagonye from the Good Place, unable to make a decision and taking an hour to pick a hat. I can't pick this starting lineup, and we're out of time, so I got to shut up now. Thanks for listening and watching the Locked On NBA podcast on Wednesdays. We're your hosts. I'm John Karalis, host of the Locked On Celtics podcast. Find me on Twitter at John_Karalis.
And I'm Jake Madison, host of Locked On Pelicans at NOLA Jake.
Nick Angstead, Pat the Designer, have tomorrow's show. Make sure you're subscribed. Get into that YouTube page. Get into the comment section. Just give us your thoughts. There's so many right answers here. I want to hear what you have to say about that. And I would love it if you shared the podcast and spread the word. Tell everybody they should be listening to and watching the Locked On NBA podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.